Hey everyone, I'm Azher Ahmed, head of digital at Octagon, the preeminent talent and management marketing and creative agency in sports and entertainment. I'm honored to be the moderator for today's panel discussing how to engage consumers and fans wherever they are, sponsored by Aquimo. With us today is a panel of esteemed guests. Maybe Mark, if you can kick us off, and then we'll go to Justin and Adrienne. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Absolutely pleasure to be here. Just a little background on me. I'm Mark Jeffery, founder and CEO of Aquimo. I'm actually a recovering professor. I was on the faculty at Northwestern Kellogg School of Management for over 15 years. I'm the author of the book Data Driven Marketing that was awarded Best Book of the Year by the American Marketing Association. So looking forward to talking data, analytics, and brand marketing and fandom.
Awesome. Hey, thank you guys for having me. Justin Toman here, head of Pepsi Sports Marketing. Been in the role for a little bit, going on my 15th year at Pepsi. I'm about 8 or 10 in the sports marketing side of it. And just love that we get to work with really big, fun brands at Pepsi and really big, massive scale sports platforms. And the intersection of that world is just such an awesome and fascinating place to be.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Adrienne Jonas, and I work at MasterCard. I've been here for about 7 years, where I manage MasterCard sponsorships for North America on the sports and arts and culture verticals. Prior to MasterCard, I spent a lot of my time at MBNA and then Bank of America, where I also led marketing and sponsorships for multiple sports properties in colleges and universities. So exciting to be here to talk to all of you today.
Yeah, thank you for being on the panel. Maybe to kick us off, there's many things I think that we can unpack here, but, first and foremost, maybe, I'd love to hear a little bit about, you've done your introduction, but maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how you fit within the company, and specifically, what does fandom mean to you? Maybe we can go in reverse order with this. Adrienne, maybe you want to kick us off. What does fandom mean to you?
Sure. I think what fandom means to me, it's about, a shared passion for something with a community. It's about a family and a community driven experience to celebrate what you love. We're all about how do we connect consumers and our fans to priceless. And it's that fandom, right? Like what you really care about. And, I'd say funny, recently I was out in Madison, Wisconsin, and I saw fandom there at a football game. It's really everybody, the connection that brings everybody together about what they love. So it's sports, it's entertainment, it's music, whatever it is. It's that shared passion for something with a community.
Yeah, that's great to hear. How about from the Pepsi perspective, Justin?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think fandom in sports is one of the most powerful things in terms of a consumer passion point that there is. I mean, there's other things like entertainment and music and fashion and food. All these things, people are into a lot of things. But if you think about the uniqueness of sport, it lasts a lifetime. It even is passed down from generation to generation. In a world where my favorite food is one thing today, and maybe I try something new tomorrow, or my taste in music, certainly fashion, changes over time. If you're born a New York Yankees fan, you probably will die a Yankees fan, even if you move to Los Angeles, and you're going to pass that down to your kids ideally. And so I love that longevity element to fandom. And in a way, it's the ultimate brand consumer relationship. If you think about sports properties as a brand unto themselves, because it's so deep and it's so deeply emotional, right? You get the blessing and the curse of that. Fans, when they love you, you'll hear about it. And fans, when they hate you, they'll hear about it. So I love the passion around it and the emotion around it. And with us, our products, are inherently part of that fan experience. If you think about what you do in a stadium, you're eating and drinking our products. If you're going to host a Super Bowl party, you're going to buy water, soda, and chips, and probably beer as well. So just inherently, our products, we think, have a relevant place to be in that fan experience. And from a brand perspective, we're trying to make sure that we're not just present, but yet we're additive to that experience and not overbearing in it. So it's a fine line, but when done right, we can truly be additive to the fan experience.
Yeah, that's great. Mark, I'd love to hear your angle as well, but, also, tell us a little bit more about Aquimo and, how you originated that idea as well in relation to fandom.
Absolutely. Well, it's all about fan engagement and just the passion that the fans have for sports, which is unbelievable. So we actually started 4 years ago. We figured out how to take mobile devices and connect them to digital boards in stadiums. We started with 3 teams. We had the Chicago White Sox, and we had the NBA team, and we had an NCAA D1 team. That was 4 years ago. Today we're live with 100+ teams and events. And again, it's all about passion. It's all about connecting the passion of the fan and the brand of whatever the team is, or the property, could be a league, with the other brands, right? And so that the 1 + 1 is like 10. But that said, though, I kind of got to show you, right, what we do. So if you don't mind, we have a 30-second video that'll explain what Aquimo does. So in a nutshell, the nerdy tech is that we're able to take thousands of fans in a stadium, and we typically today have anywhere from 4,500 to 7,500 players in an NFL stadium, and they play simultaneously on the digital board. And then the new frontier for us is we're getting into TV marketing, so you're actually playing at home.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I guess kind of parlaying with that, I'm curious within your organizations, we talked about the value of fandom and some of the uniqueness about it. I'm curious, where does fandom and sort of general sort of consumer engagement intersect at your organization? It's a little bit all over the place, I've found, in the industry. Some view it as kind of passion points, some view it as kind of broad reach sorts of affinities. Could you talk a little bit about how you view that within the organization? Maybe we'll kick it off to you, Justin, to kick us off on that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I love Mark the video. I'm happy that Mountain Dew is part of that as well.
Absolutely.
Great work with you guys on the Mountain Dew 3-point shot, and such a cool way to bring that platform to life in stadium. So yeah, listen, we look at sports a few different ways, one of which is reach, like you mentioned. There are hundreds of millions of fans, depending on the definition of a fan, in this country, in North America. And so we are, by definition, it's just a very fertile place to play in terms of reaching literally millions of people with a message. And still the value of live sports from a linear TV and even streaming perspective. We know live sports brings in eyeballs. But even beyond that, we look to sports to get that scale, but also go deep. And because it is, like I mentioned earlier, such a deeply rooted emotional passion point, we believe there's long-term brand equity value to be had to partner with sports organizations, the Yankees, the Jets, the Giants, you name it. We're fortunate to have some of the best sports partners in the world. We believe that if we partner with them, do the right things, continuously and consistently activate the partnership, which is really important, putting it out in the market for fans to see and touch and feel, that there is not only short-term sales and revenue from that, but true long-term brand equity can be built. So we do look at sports in that dual way of, yes, we know it can reach people, but we also know over time we can go really deep with them. And sports is a really big part of the marketing mix for our biggest brands. When you think about Pepsi and Mountain Dew, and even some others, Gatorade certainly is core to the athlete experience. But we do feel like it's a really important part of what we do on some of our biggest brands.
And I have some familiarity with this, Adrienne, given that MasterCard is a client, so thank you for that. But, if you could talk a little bit about price lists and kind of how you see that as being a way to ignite some of the fandom, I'd love for you to share a little bit on that.
Absolutely. It really intersects with priceless experiences across passions. We focus on core consumer passions to deliver once in a lifetime moments that the fans will never forget. Similar, it's about, delivering value for our cardholders, our partners, and also brand affection. I heard that, from you, Justin, too. But, our sponsorships and our partnerships strategically give us assets and access to the unimaginable. And that's really about, connecting those priceless experiences across the passions for our cardholders and consumers.
One thing that maybe we can pivot to is a little bit more around kind of audiences. And, I'm curious, Mark, when the sports industry, obviously this wouldn't be a pandemic panel if we didn't talk about the pandemic in some way, but when COVID hit everyone hard, no fans at stadiums and whatnot, how did Aquimo kind of adapt as an engagement sort of a company around the live sort of a process into the virtual? And then I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more broadly, from the brand side as well.
I'll tell you, it was pretty darn rough, just to say the least. I remember very vividly. I think it was it May or March 4th. I was in the stadium at the Lakers packed stadium. We're live on the board with Mountain Dew, and there's 20,000 people in that stadium. We had 2,200 players, and it was awesome. And then on the 11th, it was all over, and it was just like, oh my gosh, it was just everything stopped, right? But I think it's these hard times that make you innovate, and it drives creativity. And so we were actually in the thick of it with just about to launch. Actually, we just launched a campaign with Zion Williamson. It was a play at home 8-week campaign with Mountain Dew, and we actually pivoted very quickly to play at home. And we invented a new way to play where we had the celebrities playing live with the fans at home. And it was kind of touchy, because it was like you wanted to be this, it was really a downer, right? We're all sitting at home and you're locked down and whatnot, So the idea that you're going to go out and have fun is kind of, was very sensitive. But the idea that, hey, you can come play live with Zion Williamson and really kind of get back, have some joy and excitement was where we're at. So we actually rolled that out. It's a new product that we have that we're able to do live streaming. We're able to play against celebrities, be it on live stream TV or other media.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe I'd love to hear from the brand side. Adrienne, I know we did some work with you, obviously, with things around golf as the pandemic kind of hit. But how did you kind of adjust to the pandemic era, and how did it kind of change how you look at audiences?
Yeah, absolutely. When COVID happened, we had to quickly shift all of our experiences from live to digital. So it happened really fast. It did create real scale in enabling access to passion. From on a sports perspective, I remember, we had Tim Wakefield teaching how to do the knuckleball we had, obviously we have multiple passion points, but we would have a celebrity chef cooking with a sports athlete. We tried to connect the best way we can to consumers with virtual events, but we needed to be mindful that this is a new world, and we're going to have to keep thinking about experiences as hybrid, which will be a combination of both as we move forward.
That's great. Any stories from the PepsiCo side, Justin?
Yeah, very similar to Adrienne. I mean, we have this kind of three-tiered approach to activation, which is anchoring our brands in stadium and providing fans really fun, engaging experiences. Part of what we do at Aquimo, obviously. Activating in the retail marketplace, that's in large and small format stores all over market, and then amplifying via content, digital technology, all those things. And really, what was the first two were taken out. If you think about it, obviously nobody's in the stadium. When no butts are in seats, you can't activate there. There's nothing to do. In the market, especially on the early days of the pandemic, and I'm sure people can relate, you were running in and out of stores with 6 masks on. I mean, you were, a lot of, obviously the delivery shopping really, happened almost overnight. I mean, I didn't know what Instacart was one day, and the next day, that's all we do, right? And so we were forced in this place where we're actually not activating. We're not taking the team marks and the IP to retail environments where we sell our product. And so that all changed overnight. And so really we're looking at only one of the 3 places, which is the amplify. And that tends to be, like you mentioned, the digital experiences, the virtual, the technology, how are fans continuing to engage with sports? Because even though sports weren't happening, people were still engaging with them, whether it was old reruns of games or things like, The Last Dance, which, got hot really quickly. So we definitely started leaning into that amplify space, which is all about, the digital, the virtual. I think we had a few good wins there. And I think we tried to tap into what fans were talking about. You try to pick up on conversations because you couldn't be contextually relevant as to what happened in the game last night or what's happening now. Like that, to be real time is one thing we always try to do. But it was more about what are people saying about the Last Dance? How was Gatorade involved if they were, right? Because they had a Jordan relationship. It was finding those other moments outside of live sports, which weren't necessarily happening, unfortunately, and trying to make sure we were part of or helping instigate those conversations and experiences. So definitely, I think we all had to pivot very quickly and kind of, go off the back foot a little bit, but lean into what was happening real time, virtually mostly.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I've always said is, marketing is such a great experiment and maybe mankind's greatest experiment. But, if at first you don't succeed, you call it version 1.0, right? So I'm sure there were some moments in there during the pandemic where you guys were trying a lot of different things and maybe not all of them went the way that you did. I'm curious, were there some things that you tried early on that didn't succeed or change significantly? Anything you feel that's worth highlighting? And if so, why or why not?
I could jump in. I don't know if it was necessarily that it didn't succeed. It was more the pivot, right? So when the pandemic happened, we had planned a big campaign around contactless transit, right? So then when nobody's riding the transit, the subway, whatever it may be, we had to quickly pivot and flip it to more the digital side of things. So, similar to how Justin was mentioning that too. So it was really the quick pivot that we had to do when you had planned something and then it wasn't really relevant at that point. So that was one thing that definitely impacted us.
Unless you had something to add, Justin, maybe we could pivot to another piece of, with the hybrid sort of fandom, right? Now we've got a lot of different fandoms that have splintered and the landscape is even more scattered than it was before, especially as we return to live. I'm curious, maybe Mark, from your perspective, could you talk a little bit about how Aquimo specifically engages, customers wherever they are? And I'd love to kind of hear, from your perspectives, how you kind of adapted a little bit of reaching out to people wherever they are in more places and spaces than ever.
Well, absolutely. We started as fan engagement inside the stadium, right? So when obviously there's no fans in the stadium, that's kind of a problem. So, it became obvious that we have to figure out play at home pretty quickly. And we did that. We were actually live with 4 of the NBA teams in the bubble where we were playing at home. We were actually, and also live with the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks is a really cool example because they were up in Canada, okay? And the fans were all in Chicago, okay? But they played our game. And the crazy thing was 14,500 people played each game, which was just crazy for us. So they're playing the Aquimo tech remotely, playing at home, and it works. And so in a way, that was kind of cool. The other crazy innovation that for us came out of COVID is the QR code. Okay, so we used to be like, hey, get into Mountain Dew Play Live or whatever it might be, right? And type it in. Now it is we put QR codes on all the digital boards and on TV, and you can just scan and go. So you're in like seconds. So literally now we can engage with fans, 100,000 fans in like roughly 20 seconds, which to me it just blows my mind.
I'm curious from the brand perspective, and Adrienne and Justin, feel free to chime in, but given that sort of experimentation that happened very rapidly during COVID, I'm curious how you kind of as an organization go around sort of new testing of content or platform. Do you have kind of an enterprise strategy? Do you kind of look at things live and in market? How did you kind of do that during that whole sort of a COVID hit, and how has that kind of changed the culture, now in sort of our new reality? Maybe Justin, if you could kick us off on that.
Yeah, no, it's such I love what you said. It's a great experiment. It's like kind of a live case study every day, right? Nobody really knows the answers, but we'll try some things and see what sticks. I think that one of the biggest ironies about the pandemic was that it didn't create any of these consumer shifts. It didn't create, anything that's different now in sports because of the pandemic. It didn't create it. But the irony of the pandemic on sports was it literally stopped sports in its tracks. Yet it accelerated all these trends. Like my point, what didn't create the shift to contactless payment or mobile ticketing? Those things were already in progress for, candidly, some years in many places. It just accelerated it. So I think that's the biggest thing is there's nothing new, in my opinion, that has come come about because of COVID. It's just things have been really accelerated up that curve, and the adoption of fans has just been accelerating. Think about things like frictionless this and contactless that, and delivery of groceries. All these things were happening, but the pandemic pushed them along. And so I think, that acceleration, fans were more willing to try new things and to sign up for a streaming service or to try an Instacart delivery. And when things stick, it really happens quickly, and behavior changes. So I think for us, the biggest learning from a marketing perspective was that we have to be, agile enough to adapt to that. What's our plan for marketing when not as many people are going to grocery stores? What's our plan when stadiums might not come back for 6 months or a year, and that's a big source of revenue for us? So being able to pivot a little bit, quicker than we normally would have. And the beauty of digital is, from a content perspective, you can certainly craft things on a shoestring budget and try them. And if there is, with one team or with one league, and if it happens, or if you, kind of catch something, you can then scale it out to all your other teams. So I think we tried some things early on with, a team or two digitally. We think, if it didn't work, we didn't like it, we didn't replicate it. But if it did, we all of a sudden said, hey, this is good. Let's share this over here, share it over here, and try to build it. One good example of that was something we did with the Buffalo Bills and the Jets, which was we found this Buffalo Bills fan a Jets fan, lived next to a Buffalo Bills fan up in Buffalo, and they kind of had this like neighborly feud, of like Jets Bills, and this guy painted a Bills, logo on his garage facing his neighbor's house. And we kind of caught wind of that and really stoked it and amplified it, and ultimately ended up giving this guy a billboard and a local TV spot to kind of stick it to his neighbor to say, the Jets fans don't belong in Buffalo. All done very good natured, but it was one of these instances where you're kind of, instead of keeping track of what's going on in the game or the score, because they weren't happening, to, okay, what are fans talking about? How are fans, interacting with one another, and how can we be a part of that?
Yeah, I love that authenticity of that. Maybe Adrienne, I'd love to hear your perspective, again, whether it's part of, how you were experimenting with things, or maybe even recipes for success around engagement. Have there been any nuggets that you have for our audience in the sense of what you found does or doesn't work?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of similarities in what Justin said. I mean, the fact that the move of digital adoption in a matter of around 8 weeks would have probably taken about 5 years for what happened. I mean, I know even just from our perspective, we were talking about contactless payments, tap and go. It was all awareness of what that was, and now that's really not a factor, right? Like, people are aware of what that is and understand that difference in the payment space. So it just all happened so fast. And, similarly, even with the QR codes, right? Like, we all know that's how you get your menu. You're going in and getting it. We're used to that, and that adoption is going to stay. And the same thing with contactless payments too.
Yeah, that's great. Speaking of those sorts of things, and I remember at one point the cynic in me said, stop trying to make QR happen, but then all of a sudden it happened, right? But then, the edge of tech is what really excites me and a lot of people, just how it continues to proliferate, whether it's merchandising and collectibles manifesting as NFTs now. You continue to see esports and gaming. You start to see other things around the metaverse. I think things are coming out more every day around AR and VR. And even social sort of platforms and their engagement. I'm curious, from your organization's perspectives, do you see any sort of general trends around that for yourselves? Is it an increase, a decrease? Do you feel like you're going to stay the same in the sense of experimenting with some of that edge tech, or what is your approach to some of that emerging tech?
I think from us, we always tried to be close to the edge and doing things and pushing the boundaries and trying new things. I think just by the nature of our brands, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, you feel like, these are brands are in pop culture, and so therefore we're trying to be in pop culture and kind of ride that wave, whatever's happening. I think the pandemic did push us to try to be faster, like even more on the cutting edge. So I do think what we're trying to make sure we're doing, NFTs, or how can, one of the big things I love, and we're trying to find the right way in. We've dabbled in it a little bit, is online gambling. Can a brand like Pepsi or Mountain Dew truly partner with one of these online gambling companies and our sports partners, the NFL, the NBA, and so forth, to do some really fun things? And can we actually extend our marquee sports platforms like the 3-point contest and with the NBA is there a way to gamify that in terms of gambling and esports that in a way that would, appeal to fans? I think there is. We haven't done it yet. We're talking about a lot of things, but those are things that we're trying to do even more quickly than we were before. Because we know if you don't do it quick these days, to Adrienne's point, somebody else is going to do it, and you lose the edge.
Maybe as we start to wrap up here, I have a couple of just questions around, looking reflectively at about the past 18 months. I'm curious, have there been any sort of particular surprises? Like, what's the biggest surprise that you think you've seen in maybe the last 18 months within either, what you've seen in the brand work or the industry as a whole? Maybe Mark, if you could kick us off, I'm curious, like what surprised a scrappy sort of a pivoted company in this space?
I think it's, I think what you heard a lot in the discussion was digital. You heard digital, right? So when we think about traditional marketing that happens in a stadium, for example, right? Or even on TV, right? It's a static ad or maybe a video ad that plays, right? And it turns out that doesn't work very well. It really doesn't. And teams don't want to talk about that. Agencies don't want to talk about it, but it really doesn't work very well. So this idea that it's impressions and all that stuff, okay, great. But it turns out that 20,000 impressions you're supposed to get for your ad, if it happens 10 minutes into halftime, actually, you don't get 20,000 impressions. You don't, okay? Because everybody's out of the stadium, out of the bowl. So what we're finding, and I don't know if it's a surprise, it just is what it is, right? I kind of say, prepare to get naked, because when you do this digital stuff, you get to see the facts. You get to see that, you know what? Some teams are amazing at activating. They're great. Other teams, not so good at all, right? And it's very clear, right? So we're collecting data. We're able to and we're able to help teams. We're able to help brands using that data to improve their marketing. The value proposition we have is that on average, a person plays our games for 4.5 minutes. Okay, so it's targeted branding, be it Pepsi or whoever it might be, right? For 4.5 minutes. In addition to that, say 60-second spot on the board, you know who your players are. By the way, we're collecting data on those players, right? So we get the players. And the beautiful thing, I think, this is nerdy stuff, right? We offer you a coupon at the end of it. So here's a digital coupon so you can go get your free Pepsi, right? At the grocery store or at the concession stand. And by the way, that's closing the loop on ROI. So big picture to me is, I think, is a surprise, or it's a happy accident, if you will. The drive to digital is improving marketing overall as we get data and transparency.
That's great. Adrienne or Justin, from your perspective, any surprises?
I'll just reiterate what I said before, which was, if you had told me, before the pandemic started, hey, if the world of sports just suddenly stopped, would fan trends accelerate? I would have said that's completely ironic. No, absolutely not. But that was the biggest surprise. The actual stoppage of sports has had this massive acceleration on trends in sports and fan consumption. And the one other thing, I shouldn't be surprised, because we're so fortunate to have great partners in sports. But just having gone through a lot of these tough conversations, a tough year and a half with partners, the strength of our partnerships, I think, is even better. Our partnerships are stronger and deeper now. Most of our teams and leagues than it was even before, because you kind of went through the ringer together and took a common sense over contract approach, and I think we're in a better place because of it.
I guess, Adrienne, I'll lob it up to you as an audible here, so you can either go over a surprise or maybe just predict the future. What are some of the trends or technologies that excite you about consumer engagement? Your choice.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm very aligned. I think that at least the one thing that definitely, how quickly everything moved to digital was what was the biggest surprise as far as how fast it all happened. But I think the future of hybrid experiences, that's something that's going to stick. Definitely something that I think we see, digitally enabling experiences, becoming an integral to how consumers engage with their passions. I think that's something like an immersive digital experience that's something that's going to stay. And then I think what excites me, what I think I know everyone, as we talked a little bit about it, NFT and where that goes. I think that'll be an interesting thing as in here to see where that goes. I know we want to try it. We've done one globally. We did an NFT globally, so I think that's something that's coming.
Yeah, I love the implications on sort of closing the loop with commerce as well. Within that, Justin, same question for you. What excites you about the trends, the platforms, the technologies, the future?
Yeah. I think NFTs are really interesting. It's still hard to figure out the true value and candidly where a brand like ours fits in with that. Like, what value are we truly bringing to the equation that the fans and consumers are going to see value in? But I think that's something we'll definitely try and hopefully succeed in. I still love the intersection of brands and sports gambling, and what does that truly look like that is good for the brand, is good for the gambling operator, and ultimately engaging for the fan. I also love, I'm just watching it from afar, but all these emerging essentially sponsorship categories that didn't exist a year ago, crypto, fintech, again, online sports gambling, like all these things are, they're showing up in sports and in sponsorship, and seeing what they do and how they engage with properties is really interesting. So we're keeping an eye on that and hopefully taking some learnings.
Great. Same for you, Mark.
Well, I'm just crazy excited. Again, the nerd in me is I'm all about gamification, and it's coming, and it's going to be everywhere. It's really coming. As I said, we went from 4 teams to 100+ teams, where the vast majority of those are full season in stadium in just 4 years, and we're coming for TV and live stream. And you're going to see that the difference between a TV ad that just plays and you interact with the ad and you could win something, or by the way, you win a coupon or whatever it might be, it's night and day. It is this. We've actually done the ROI on it. It's anywhere from 350 to 750% better ROI for the brand. So it's coming, the fan engagement and thinking about new ways to engage the fans on that device that everybody's got in their pocket. How do we do that?
Yeah, totally. And to answer my own question, one of the things that really excites me, being a former, technology person, designer that became a direct marketer and then an advertiser, is the fact that now we've got the scale available, to your point, Jeff, there's so much that's there. And I feel like, we can finally close the loop with companies like yours, Mark, to be able to reach the scale that we need. But at the same time, also really be very personal in ways. And I think privacy legislation and some of those things are making organizations wake up to the fact that first party data is more valuable than ever. And now it's a question of the value exchange. What can we do with it to provide true value in some way in a direct model that I think is, the Pandora's box is ready to be cracked wide open. So, all right. On that, I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you again to our sponsor, Aquimo. And with that, we'll let you get back to the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, guys.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.